Welcome to the podcast about venture capital, where investors and founders alike can learn how VCs make decisions and reach conviction. Your host is Nick Moran, and this is The Full Ratchet.
Welcome to another special release of Investor Stories. On this installment, the experts discuss a startup that they did not invest in, why they passed, and if there was a key learning that now informs their approach. Here's the segment called Why I Passed. On today's special segment, we have Eric Collins of Impact X. Eric, can you tell us a story about a good or a bad pass? A story about a startup that you passed on?
I want to continue. May I continue on this COVID-19 sort of front? Because I think that, we've had a good opportunity. All of a sudden, everything changed, right? I've been through many crises in my career in terms of whether it be the dot-com bubble or whether it be September 11th or whether it be the 2008 financial meltdown, and had to operate companies and invest during those different periods. COVID has proven that some of the things that I took for granted were just not the case. So for instance, we were looking at a proximity marketing organization that the chief data scientist here in the UK had actually invested in, was very much behind, and looked like one of those sort of organizations was really going to become very integral in the casual dining space, in the pub space, which is, part of, it's almost a national treasure here in the UK. And we decided to pass on it. COVID-19 accelerated a dynamic which was likely to happen anyway, but because it then shut down these sort of small and medium-sized businesses, it was one of those passes that we made that obviously in retrospect is for the best. So that's actually a good pass.
On today's special segment, we have Gigi Levy Weiss of NFX. Gigi, can you tell us a story about a good or a bad pass, a story about a startup that you passed on?
Whoa, I passed on so many good startups. I'd like to think that I always had a good reason. I think the answer is that I was just many times not insightful enough or not smart enough. And in most cases, I think that I corrected it by investing in the founder's next company. But I can tell you, for example, that, there's a bunch of stories. The funniest one is that when I ran a company called 888 many years ago, we were offered to buy King for like $20 million. King was then pre-Candy Crush. They were doing kind of skill games for money in Italy, and we looked at it and we just didn't like it. And clearly that was a pretty poor decision at the time. I also think that in Israel, while I didn't meet the founders at the time, but one of the investors in Waze told me about the idea, and while I thought that the concept of the users contributing was brilliant, Google already had a Maps product. Apple was going to come out with a Maps product. Everybody was having a Maps product. Nokia was having a Maps product at the time. And it occurred to me that a small startup out of Israel with no experience in the field is going to have a really tough time succeeding in it. And so while I didn't have the chance to say no directly, I kind of gave a pretty, kind of mediocre view of what's this chance of success. And clearly I was very wrong. And every time I meet the founding teams, I tell them that, and I say how much I learned from it. And so, I do have many misses. I think that's part of the business. I think if you don't have many, well, maybe there are some that don't, but if you don't have many misses, it probably usually means that you haven't seen enough companies.
On today's special segment, we have Tim Guleri of Sierra. Tim, can you tell us a story about a good or a bad pass? A story about a startup that you passed on.
Okay, let's start with, kind of the one that got away, or one of the big misses. So it was 2002. I was second week on the job, and my partner invites me to a meeting, and the company that's pitching is Salesforce.com. And And it is not Mark Benioff, because I think he'd just taken the board seat, and it was John Dillon, who was the CEO at the time. And I was a CRM guy, Scopus and Octane was CRM company. So my partner brings me in and says, "Hey, you know a lot about this space. What do you think about this deal?" And I listened to the pitch, and I was very impressed by the pitch. And I said, "Hey, I think we should do it." They were raising $10 million, I think, at like 30 pre. So we could have bought, a fourth of the company at the time. And one of the senior partners said, "That is rubbish. I mean, these guys are actually, the monthly churn rate is 4%. I mean, these guys are losing half their customers, every year. Like, what kind of a business is this?" Right. And, we passed on the deal. What's the market cap now? 138 billion.
Well, I won't look it up for your sake.
So you do the math, Nick. That was a harsh first miss. I remember that well. And through the years, obviously, Mark Benioff's been a good friend, and he's come and presented at our CIO conference many times. And they're a phenomenal bellwether for the SaaS movement, and great company that we partner really well with. So
we all miss sometimes.
Yes.
We missed on one of your great companies, Astronomer. So, we've got our regrets.
Yes, we all do. But that's what keeps us humble, right? That's what keeps us humble. So you try not to make the same mistake twice. Yep.
On today's special segment, we have Ben Casnocha of Village Global. Ben, can you tell us a story about a good or a bad pass? A story about a startup that you passed on?
There's a company called BetterUp, which a really talented founder named Alexi started 5 or 6 years ago, that aggregates coaches, life coaches, business coaches, for companies. So they'll go to a company like Adobe and go to their middle managers and say, "Hey, what if all of you had executive coaches?" And Adobe says, "Yeah, that'd be awesome." And they can use the BetterUp network of coaches to fulfill that part of their employees' professional development. And the company's doing really well now. And I had sort of this mental block because it's a classic mistake that investors make, which is when you know a lot about an area, sometimes that makes you irrationally bearish. And, I've written a book about HR and talent development. I spent a lot of time thinking about HR, and anything that sort of touches HR, coaching in the workplace tools, people development, talent development, I'm just inherently a little skeptical of. And so I foolishly passed on spending more time with BetterUp and angel investing at the very first round. And I'm now trying to correct for my bias with respect to HR tech and talent development products.
You're so right. And it's so hard when you're close to the domain. When you have super deep experience in the domain, I've found it very difficult to get to conviction on an investment.
I think it's one of the most ironic and thus interesting dynamics to venture investing, which is to what extent does expertise in an area make you a better early stage investor? There's no doubt it makes you a better late stage investor. But if you're trying to back, this is the whole thing about a lot of the PayPal mafia being bearish on fintech and payment stuff, because when you've gone through the emotional trauma that was the PayPal experience, you're not exactly getting up every day, even a decade or two later, saying, "Show me a payments company." So I think it's a really interesting dynamic where expertise can be a blind spot in early stage investing.
Well, it's like my guys were saying the other day. We were looking at the portfolio, right? We have nearly 30 investments, and they were asking, do you think the investments over the past year or year and a half will outperform the previous ones? Because we've had some really big hits early on. We had some good luck, and I said, well, I really hope so. I hope we're getting better at this as time goes on. It would be a real shame if we're getting worse.
Indeed. I think one of the most challenging parts of the venture job for me is that the time horizon is so long that it's hard to get concrete interim feedback on whether you're on the right track, right? Whether you're actually getting better. And so you really have to search for ways to get feedback from the market, from mentors and colleagues, to calibrate and to remain a learning machine that's pointed in the right direction.
That will conclude this installment of Investor Stories. If you're enjoying the program and would like to see it continue, take a moment and leave a 5-star review in iTunes. Also, if you'd like updates on new content from TFR, as well as the top 10 VC articles every week, go to fullratchet.net and sign up for the newsletter. Okay, that will wrap things up for today. Until next time, over-prepare, choose carefully, and invest confidently. Thanks for joining me.